Hi everyone. I'm Helen from Susan's family. Today I'll show you the soft feather top. For this electronic tutorial, you can search for susodiy.com on the website and check it out. The top is divided into front pieces, back piece, joining, collar edge and armhole edges. First, complete the front and back pieces separately. Then join the front and back pieces at the body sections and the shoulders. After completing these, knit the collar edge and armhole edges separately. This top comes in several sizes. The knitting method is identical, only the stitch count and row count of some sections vary. Also, there are 2 styles for this top. The body section is the same for both styles. The neck opening is shaped oppositely on the front and back pieces. That is to say, the body section of style 1's front piece is identical to the body section of style 2's back piece. The body section of style 1's back piece is identical to the body section of style 2's front piece. Moving forward, I will demonstrate and explain using style 1 as an example. For style 2, follow the same method and knit the corresponding front and back pieces. Let's start by knitting the front piece. It is divided into 2 sections, the body and the shoulder parts area. Start with the body section first. Before we start knitting, let's take a look at the chart. The chart is in this square format. 1 square on the chart represents 1 stitch. This corresponds to 1 loop while knitting. For stitches together, whether it's 2 or more stitches combined into 1, they still occupy just 1 square. Here, different stitch keys represent different stitch techniques. These will all be labeled accordingly on the chart. I won't go through each example here. In the chart, these blank areas mean there are no stitches. It means no knitting is required. When counting the number of stitches in each row, just count the number of squares. Then match them with the loops on the needle. The numbers on the side of the chart indicate the row numbers. For the right side, read the chart from right to left. For the wrong side, read the chart from left to right. Pay attention when working on the wrong side. You need to knit for the purl stitch key, and purl for the knit stitch key. That's the basic introduction to the chart. Now let's start knitting. For convenience in watching, from now on, I will use a single strand of cotton yarn for the demonstration, and the colors will be random. For specific yarn, color schemes, and needle sizes, please refer to the detail page of our product and the paper instructions. First, we need to cast on. Here I'll use the right hand long tail cast on method. Please watch the demonstration. Let's start with the long tail cast on. Before casting on, you need to leave a tail of yarn at a certain length. Usually, it's about 3 times the length of the fabric piece. Refer to the chart for the exact length. Make a slip knot with the yarn tail. Pick up a straight needle with your left hand, or one end of a circular needle, and insert it into the loop. Slightly tighten. This is the first stitch. Hold the 2 strands of yarn with your right hand. Insert your thumb and index finger between these 2 strands. Pay attention. The strand connected to the yarn ball should be on your index finger. The reserved long tail should be on your thumb. Straighten the yarn. Insert the needle upwards through the loop on your thumb. Then pick up the yarn on your index finger from behind to front. Pull the yarn through the loop on your thumb. Release the yarn from your thumb, slightly tighten it. This is the second stitch. Now, start the third stitch, straighten the yarn. Insert the needle upwards, through the loop on your thumb. Then pick up the yarn on your index finger from behind to front. Pull the yarn through the loop on your thumb. Release the yarn from your thumb, slightly tighten. The third stitch is now complete. Continue with the fourth stitch. First, insert the needle into the loop on your thumb. Then pick up the yarn on your index finger and pull it through the loop on your thumb. Release the yarn from your thumb, slightly tighten. The fourth stitch is now complete. Note: the yarn connected to the yarn ball should always be on your index finger. The reserved yarn should be on your thumb. Don't get them mixed up. Repeat this process. Continue casting on. Stop when you've reached the required number of stitches. This is the long tail cast on method. After completing the cast on, start working row 1. Let me clarify one more thing here. The body section of style 1's front piece is identical to the body section of style 2's back piece. Next, I'll demonstrate the knitting technique. Start with 1 knit stitch. Then do 1 purl stitch. After that, work 3 knit stitches. Followed by 1 K2 tog. Once done, continue with 2 knit stitches. Then work 1 yarn over stitch, followed by 1 purl stitch. And 1 yarn over stitch. Then work 2 knit stitches. Followed by 1 SKP. Then do 3 knit stitches. And 1 purl stitch. That covers all the stitch techniques used in this row, as demonstrated before. You can refer to the chart. Continue knitting afterward. once you finish the last stitch. That concludes the first row explanation. Now move on to work row 2. Turn your work. We will work this row on the wrong side. Pay attention to knitting for the purl stitch key, and purling for the knit stitch key. Start with 1 purl stitch. Then do 1 knit stitch. Continue knitting according to the chart from here. Once you finish the last stitch, that completes row 2. For rows 3 through 16, there are no new stitch techniques or methods introduced. Just follow the pattern chart for the knitting. Mind that on row 9, you need to knit yarn over stitches on both sides of the centered stitch. This is how we do the increases. After you finish these rows, I will explain row 17. It involves 2 new stitch techniques, M1L increase and S2 stitch. Also, starting from this row, we will divide the work into 2 different pattern areas moving forward. The beginning and ending patterns are identical. I call this pattern 1 area. In the center is pattern 2 area. Start by following the chart. Finish the starting pattern 1 area first. Then move on to knit pattern 2 area. My sample swatch has reached the corresponding position here. Knit 1 stitch next. Then work 1 M1L increase stitch. After that, continue knitting 15 knit stitches in sequence. Then knit 1 yarn over stitch. Next, S2 stitch. Continue with another 1 yarn over stitch. Then do 15 knit stitches. After that, knit 1 M1L increase stitch. Follow up with 1 knit stitch. At this point, pattern 2 area is complete. From here on, just refer to the pattern chart for pattern 1 area. Finish with the last stitch. That concludes the explanation of the method for row 17. For the remaining rows, work pattern 1 area at both ends evenly. In pattern 2 area, you need to increase stitches at both ends, according to a specific pattern. The stitch techniques and methods used have all been demonstrated before. Refer to the chart to finish knitting the remaining body section. At this point, the body section of style 1's front piece, and the body section of style 2's back piece have been fully explained. Next, we will explain the shoulder parts area. The knitting methods for these 2 styles are identical, only the patterns used are slightly different. For either style in this section, you can knit the pattern parts using the previous methods. Moving forward, I will focus on explaining this area, including the new stitches and techniques involved. The shoulder parts needs to be divided into left and right sections for separate knitting. The left and right here refer to the actual left and right when wearing it. When starting, you need to shape the neckline by creating a neck opening over the first few rows. During the last few rows, short rows are required. This will form the sloping shoulders on both sides. Following the knitting sequence, start by continuing with the yarn from the body and knit one of the shoulder part. After completing the corresponding number of stitches here, leave the remaining stitches unknitted, then decrease stitches at the neckline according to the given pattern. After finishing the corresponding row count, begin short rows on the outer side. Finally, finish knitting and place the stitches on hold. After completion, join the yarn and pick up the remaining stitches at the neckline, then bind off a few stitches. Next, knit the other shoulder part section separately. Similarly, here you will bind off the stitches for the neckline on the inner side. For the last few rows, short rows are required on the outer side. After finishing, place the stitches on hold. Next, I will demonstrate the method for binding off the neckline, as well as the technique for shoulder short row knitting. Everyone, please study carefully first, then refer to the pattern chart for knitting. Please watch the demonstration. Let's learn how to do the neckline decrease. I will explain using this chart as an example. The entire chart consists of knit stitches. If there is a pattern, just knit the pattern as usual. We will consider the side with the knit texture as the right side of the piece. Also, sometimes the shoulders require short rows. There are no short rows here. I will only explain the method for neckline decreases. The stitch and row count in this chart are relatively small. The focus is on explaining the technique. First, use the yarn from the bottom section to knit the right half part. Note: the left and right mentioned here refer to the left and right when laid flat. It has nothing to do with the left and right of the garment. For the first row on the right side, start by knitting the corresponding number of knit stitches. In the actual chart, it might not be convenient to mark the stitch count here. You can use the total stitch count and subtract the bind off stitch count in the middle section. Then divide by 2. The result will be the number of stitches you need to knit for this first row. Now, I have finished knitting the first row on the right side. The remaining part includes the stitches in the middle and on the left side. Stop knitting for a moment. You can leave the stitches on the needle. If it's not convenient, you can use a piece of scrap yarn to temporarily secure these loops. Then, turn your workpiece and start knitting the second row on the right side. You'll notice that you need to bind off 3 stitches here. For decreases of 2 or more stitches, you can use the bind off stitch. Since you can only do continuous decreases at the beginning of each row, the decreases on both sides will be staggered by 1 row. If you need to decrease a larger number of stitches, you can mark the loops that need to be decreased beforehand with stitch markers. If you don't have stitch markers, you can use safety pins or paper clips as substitutes. At the beginning, there's a stitch key for K2 tog. At this point, we're working it on the wrong side, therefore, here we need to work K2 tog purlwise. First, slip 1 stitch to the right needle. Then work 1 purl stitch. Next, pass the previous stitch over this one. The K2 tog purlwise is now complete, and at the same time, we've bound off the first stitch. This method of K2 tog purlwise can also be done like this simultaneously. Insert and purl one stitch through the next two loops on the left side. You can work it according to your preference. Continue to bind off the second stitch. Work one purl stitch. Then pass the previous stitch over this one. The second stitch is now bound off, unless otherwise specified. On the wrong side, you're binding off purlwise. There's one stitch remaining to the right of the marker. That's the loop for the third stitch. We need to bind off this stitch. Therefore, work one more stitch, and then bind it off. Pay attention. When binding off the last stitch, the stitch you need to work is the square adjacent to the last bind off stitch key. Since different patterns may have different stitch techniques, make sure to follow the chart for the corresponding stitch technique. Here I should continue with purl stitches and bind off. This way, the 3 stitches at the beginning of the second row are bound off. Continue normally to finish the remaining stitches. Note: the next should start from the second stitch next to the bind off stitch key. Before starting, slightly tighten this loop to prevent any noticeable holes. Here we should work all stitches as purl. Now, the second row on the right side is done. Next, work the third row. Refer to the chart. Just knit all stitches. I've finished it already. After finishing, continue with the fourth row. Here you just need to bind off 2 stitches. The method is identical to the method used for binding off 2 stitches at the beginning of the first row. First, slip 1 stitch. Then work 1 purl stitch. Next, pass the first stitch over the second stitch. This way, you've bound off the first stitch. Continue with 1 more purl stitch. Bind off the second stitch. The second stitch is now bound off. For the rest, just work all stitches as purl. After finishing the fourth row, There's no need to decrease for the 5th and 6th rows, just knit them normally. That means all knit stitches on the right side, and all purl stitches on the wrong side. At the end of the 7th row, you need to decrease 1 stitch, specifically, work 1 K2 tog. Note, sometimes, the chart will place the rigged side decrease of 1 stitch at the beginning of the wrong side. The knitting method is the same as the technique used earlier to bind off the first stitch. Next, I'll demonstrate the situation where you decrease 1 stitch at the end on the right side. Continue working on the 7th row, start by knitting the stitches normally. Keep going until there are 2 loops left. After that, work 1 K2 tog. At the same time, insert from left to right through the 2 loops on the left. Knit 1 stitch. The K2 tog is now complete. This decreases 1 stitch. On the wrong side, work the 8th row with purl stitches as usual. For the 9th row, you'll need to decrease 1 stitch at the end again. The method is the same as for the 7th row. For the last 2 rows, just work them evenly. After completing all the rows on the right side, these loops should be handled according to the chart instructions. I will pause here. After finishing the right side, you need to start by binding off the corresponding stitches in the middle. In some charts, this part might involve temporarily leaving the stitches on hold. If it's a case of holding stitches, then you should keep the corresponding loops temporarily secured. Begin knitting again by joining the yarn at the first stitch on the left side. Here, we are binding off. First, transfer these loops onto the needle. You can separate the stitches in the middle that need to be bound off. Then join the yarn. Pick up the new yarn. Make a slip knot with the yarn tail. Slightly tighten the loop. Insert the right needle into the first loop. Draw the new yarn loop through. The joining is now complete. Knit 1 stitch. Then pass the first stitch over the second stitch. This way, you've bound off 1 stitch. Continue binding off knitwise. When there are no special instructions, on the right side, you'll be binding off knitwise. Remember as well that, when binding off the last loop, this knitted stitch is the one adjacent to the bind-off stitch key on your chart? Be sure to refer to the chart for the correct stitch technique. Here, we'll continue with knit stitches and bind off. Once done, start from the second stitch to finish this row. Then, on the wrong side, purl the entire second row. Now I've already finished the second row. Let's move on to the third row. Here you need to bind off 3 stitches in a row. It starts with a stitch symbol for SKP, O. First, slip the first stitch like this. Then knit 1 stitch. Next, pass the slipped stitch over the knitted one. That's it for binding off the first stitch. Continue with 1 more knit stitch. Then pass the previous stitch over the next stitch. The second stitch is now bound off. Proceed to bind off the third stitch. After completing that, knit 1 by 1 accordingly. Then purl a row on the wrong side. This means finishing the fourth row. I've now completed the fourth row. For the fifth row, you need to bind off 2 stitches at the beginning. The bind off method is identical to the first 2 stitches of row 3. That is, start with 1 SKP, O. Then bind off 1 stitch. After completing that, continue knitting the rest of the row in knit stitches. Then finish the 6th row with purl stitches. Now, I've completed the 6th row. Continue on to the 7th row. You can see that, for this row, you only need to bind off 1 stitch at the beginning. Therefore, here you just work 1 SKP, O. After finishing that, I continue knitting the rest of the row. Now, I've completed the 7th row. Later, row 9 will be identical to row 7 here. For the other rows, just knit them evenly. After completing everything, follow the chart instructions to handle these loops. Up to this point, the neckline decrease has been fully explained. For the short rows with held stitches, for example, on row 1 here, I work short rows by holding 5 stitches on one side. That means you knit as usual at first. And when there are 5 stitches left, you stop knitting. I've now finished row 1. Turn your work. Continue with row 2. Start row 2 with a double stitch. Regardless of the stitch technique, make sure to place the yarn above the right needle. Slip the first stitch. Then tighten the yarn. If the next stitch is a purl stitch, you need to wrap the yarn around. Bring it up before you purl. If the next stitch is a knit stitch, just knit it directly. Here, I'm doing purl stitches on the wrong side. You can see that in row 2, there are short rows with 5 stitches on this side. That means stop knitting when there are 5 stitches left at the end. Once completed, turn your work. Continue with row 3. Start with a double stitch, which means slip the first stitch purlwise. Pull tight the yarn. If the next stitch is a purl stitch, wrap the yarn one more time, bring it to the above and then purl. If the next stitch is a knit stitch, just knit it directly. Here, I'm doing a knit stitch. Sometimes the number of stitches for each short row section is identical. Sometimes it varies due to patterns or other reasons. The stitch number of short rows can be different. You need to knit according to the chart specifically. You can notice that there are 3 stitches for short rows at the ending of row 3. Pay attention. A double stitch counts as 1 stitch here. That means these 3 stitches should be skipped. Now, row 3 is finished. For row 4, there are also 3 stitches for short rows at the end. Likewise, the double stitch should be considered as 1 stitch. After each short row, you need to start with a double stitch. Now, row 4 is finished. Sometimes, you need to dig the neckline in the middle while doing short rows. You can refer to the pattern when knitting. I will continue to finish all the rows that require short rows in this chart. Now, I have already completed it. After completing the short rows, the third to last row of this chart is done. Next, you need to eliminate the row offset, that is, row 9 here. Eliminate the row offset on this side first. I will knit all stitches here. When you encounter a double stitch, treat it as one stitch and knit it. The eliminating row offset on this side is complete. On the last row, you need to eliminate the row offset on this side. Here, I will purl all stitches on the wrong side. When you encounter a double stitch, treat it as one stitch and purl it. This is the short row knitting with held stitches. At this point, the explanation of the shoulder parts area is finished. Up to this point, the entire front piece has been fully explained. Next, I will explain the back piece. It's also divided into the body and the shoulder parts. The body section of Style 1's back piece is identical to the body section of Style 2's front piece, and when knitting the pattern, you also increase stitches in the pattern 2 area. For pattern 1, work evenly. Here, the beginning and ending of the back piece become pattern 2, while pattern 1 remains centered. The method for increasing stitches and knitting the patterns is the same as for the front piece. After completing the body section, knit the 2 shoulder parts separately. Here you need to start with short row shaping for both shoulders. When working the last few rows, bind off stitches at the centered neckline position. The method for the short rows and neckline binding off is completely identical to the front piece. The only difference is that after finishing one shoulder part, you need to join and bind off together with the shoulder part of the front piece. So let me explain the method for joining and binding off together. Please watch the demonstration. The first method is stitch-to-stitch joining. This is used when both pieces are still in loops. And it's a common joining method. It involves binding off together to join the pieces. It's typically used for joining the shoulders of the front and back pieces. Both pieces are still in loop form. We'll consider the side with the stockinette stitch. As the right side, the binding off usually happens on the wrong side of the fabric. That means you need to place the 2 pieces right sides together. Usually, one of the pieces has yarn that isn't cut. No matter which piece this yarn is on, place the side with the uncut yarn on the right. When binding off together, you generally bind off knitwise. That means passing through loops from both pieces simultaneously. You knit the stitches while performing the bind off. The stitch counts for the two pieces are usually the same. Just knit them correspondingly, and bind off. If one piece has more stitches, you need to decrease and bind off on the side with more stitches. If this piece has more stitches, you can pass through 2 loops at once. Then continue by passing through 1 loop. Bind off knitwise. If the other piece has more stitches, pass through 2 loops from that piece at once. Bind off knitwise. In my case, both pieces have the same stitch count. I'll continue binding them off. Just tie a knot with the yarn tail and hide it. This is the result after binding off the pieces together. That concludes the explanation of knitting the back piece. Next, we'll discuss the joining process. Only the body sections of the front and back pieces need to be joined here. First, refer to the schematic diagram. Leave space for the armholes at the top. The remaining part is the area that needs to be joined. Here, we use a row-to-row joining method. Pick up the corresponding position of edge stitch, and sew to join. Let me demonstrate the method for row-to-row joining. Everyone, please learn this first. Then join according to the actual situation later. Please watch the demonstration. Next, we'll learn how to join row-to-row. We usually use the invisible seam method as well. When sewing, pick up the horizontal carried yarn of 2 edge stitches. We can first get familiar with the fabric piece. First, locate the first stitch on the edge. The first stitch on the edge usually has 4 situations. The first one is a slip stitch. That is, pick it following the texture without knitting, forming a large braid. The second one is also a slip stitch. However, when doing the slip stitch, it goes against the texture below, forming such a knot. The third one involves knitting every row. Usually, you knit on the right side, and purl on the wrong side. This forms a small braid. The fourth one also involves knitting every row. Usually, you knit on both the right and wrong sides. This creates a garter stitch. The stitch to the left of the first stitch is the second stitch. For example, this fabric piece. When viewed from this side, the second stitch shows the knit texture. When viewed from the other side, the second stitch is purl texture. Regardless of whether the second stitch is knit texture or purl texture, you can find that the loops are all facing forward. these reversed loops. With the horizontal lines below, are the horizontal carried yarns between two stitches? It's the same on this side too. This is the reversed loop. This one is the horizontal carried yarn between two stitches. It's the same for the edge when knitting garter stitch. This is the second stitch. This column is the second stitch. Forward-facing loops. Between these two stitches, the reversed loops. This single line is the horizontal carried yarn between two stitches? The edge is slip stitch, likewise. Between these two stitches, there is also a horizontal carried yarn. No matter which kind, one strand of carried yarn roughly corresponds to one row. Before sewing together, you can first weave in the yarn tails on the wrong side, and tie a knot to secure it. I won't weave in here for demonstration purposes. Seamless sewing means alternating between the two fabric pieces each time. Picking up the horizontal carried yarns of the two edge stitches, and sewing them together. Pick up 1 to 2 strands each time. Note, if the row counts of the two pieces match, you can sew them together corresponding stitch by stitch. That is, the number of strands picked up each time will be the same. Always insert the needle where you last pulled out. To pick up the horizontal carried yarn. Here, I pick up 1 strand each time. After sewing a few stitches, slightly tighten the yarn. If the row counts of the two pieces are different, but you want to sew them evenly together, you can pick up more strands on the side with more rows. For example, overall, you pick up 1 strand each time. On the side with more rows, at appropriate positions, you can pick up 2 strands. Here, the row counts of the two pieces are identical. I will continue and finish sewing. This is the seamless sewing for row to row. That concludes the explanation of the joining part. Next, we'll knit the collar edge and armhole edges. This section involves bordure knitting. We'll use the method of picking up stitches along the edge while knitting, and clustering stitches at the same time. This forms a bordure texture like this. The methods for both areas are the same, just with slightly different stitch counts. Next, I'll demonstrate the knitting technique using the collar edge as an example. Here, I'll use this sample swatch for the demonstration. Start from the sewing position at one shoulder side. The exact spot can also be adjusted according to actual conditions. It's usually at the seam or along the edge. You can see that there are little braids along the edge of the fabric. Here, one braid corresponds to one row of the fabric. Next, pick up the yarn. Start by cable cast on 3 stitches. Then knit 3 stitches, matching them one by one. After that, pick up the fabric. On the left side of the sewing position, work into the space below the edge braid. Pick up 1 stitch. This is equivalent to picking up 1 stitch from this row. Then move the loop to the right edge. Pick up another straight needle with your right hand. Knit 2 stitches from the loops on the left needle. Next, work 1 cluster stitch. Here, insert the needle behind through 2 loops. Knit 1 stitch. The cluster stitch is now completed. Move to the left. Continue picking up the braid along the edge of the next row. Pick up 1 stitch. Then move the loop to the edge. Pick up another needle with your right hand. Knit 2 stitches. Work 1 cluster stitch. For all cluster stitches here, insert the needle behind the loops. After completing it, continue picking up 1 stitch on the fabric. Everyone, pay attention. I'm mainly demonstrating the method here. The pattern for picking up stitches can be random. In actual knitting, pay attention and refer to the chart for the pattern when picking up stitches. Repeat this process moving forward. Start with 2 knit stitches first. Then work 1 cluster stitch. Next, pick up 1 stitch according to the pattern. If it's difficult to insert the hook into the edge braid, or if there is a large space after picking up, you can also pick up 2 strands closer to the edge. Following this method, keep knitting all the way back to the starting position. After picking up the last stitch, continue knitting using the previous method. Reserve a long yarn tail, and cut off at the end. There are 3 loops left after finishing this section. These need to be sewn together with the starting position. You can see the starting position, where there are 3 braids in the first row on top. Pick up the loops and sew them together corresponding to the 3 braids. Thread the yarn into a sewing needle. Start by exiting from behind the rightmost loop. Then find the starting position. The first braid. Pick it up, and insert the needle. Then insert from the front into the previous loop. Drop the loop. And then exit from behind the next loop on the left. Sew this together with the second braid at the starting point. Insert from the front into the second loop. Release the loop. Sew once more following the same method. At this point, adjust the sewn loops a bit. Finally, pass the thread to the wrong side. And tie a few knots to secure it. Then hide the remaining yarn tail inside the fabric. You can weave in a few more stitches if you'd like. That's how you finish the collar edge. Next, I'll explain the armhole edges. It's the same method as for the collar edge. Follow along the armhole position and work around the edge following a certain pattern. Pick up stitches as you go while knitting. At the end, sew it together at the starting position. Just complete it according to what we've covered. That concludes the explanation for making the armhole edges. Up to this point, the entire process of making the top has been fully explained. If you have any questions during the process, don't hesitate to reach us via our website, Susan's Family, supporting your handwork experience, sharing the joy of life. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you in the next episode.